1990s through 2000s, specifically, we're going to be looking at the economy here. And really, this is going to be more the early 2000s than the later 2000s. So I should mention, with the coming of the year 2000, people were concerned about Y2K because a lot of programmers had specifically only used the last two digits of the year. And so they realized that when it went from 99 to 00, that might choke a lot of different systems with electronic confusion. Almost nothing actually happened, thankfully. We're going to see more than ever during this time period, America is going to be part of a global economy. We're also seeing really the impact of the electronic revolution, which you could make the argument is still going on all the way through 2020 at least. And a lot of the electronics and everything coming about from the electronic revolution are being absorbed thus into the structures and routines of American society. The thing is, when you're looking at like the 90s through parts of the 2000s, things are going well. The economy is good. The stock market is soaring. There's lots of jobs. Home ownership rose. And prosperity is reaching all parts of American society. It's not just those at the top, but a lot of people at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak. And we're actually going to see under Clinton, the United States manages to have surpluses for a few years, so it's bringing down that federal deficit and everything. And then with the deficit reduction bill, this seems to promise fiscal stability. We're also getting productivity of manufacturing rising. A lot of people look at all this prosperity and growth during the 90s, and they basically expected it to be a new wave of economic expansion. This is not actually going to be the case because we're going to see things like the dot-com bust dragging down on the stock market for several years, and then we get a real estate bubble, and this would end up diverting investment from like more productive uses to kind of bail out these other problems. We're also seeing during this time period America becoming a more and more service economy. That is the economy of the United States, an economy of services during this time period. This is jobs where people are not directly involved in producing or processing a physical product. So when you're talking about services, it can be anything from being like a lawyer to being a hairstylist. A lot of the bottom minimum wage jobs tend to be service industry jobs, but we also see a lot of the best jobs when you're dealing with like information and like mass communication, oftentimes are also service industry jobs, because these are adding to the wealth of American society, not through actual like products, but oftentimes through ideas. Which, speaking of ideas, you have to talk about, technology, electronics. We're seeing a high-tech sector of society, and a lot of this had grown hand in hand with the defense budget due to the Cold War previously. I mean, IBM was made from like Cold War bombers. We're going to see computer manufacturing rising during this time period. We're going to see a lot of smaller, more specialized machines for purposes like word processing. We get all kinds of improvements to like computing capacity, and this really drives this electronic boom. You get computers in everything, and I mean everything, to like your car literally diagnosing engine problems. And then we're starting to see internet access for more and more, and in fact 80% of adults had internet access in 2005. And then that means their children start using computers. You'll see this, that my 1-year-old son will grab my phone and he tries to swipe it already because he knows that it does things to his own, and that's what he sees his mom doing with the phone. So there's an element of that children are used to using technology from a younger age as well. Also, because of the technology of this time we are going to see society becomes an instant society. There's not the same kind of delays to the postal system or the cost of like long distance telephone calls. Normally, if I saw you in person for this class, I'd ask, okay, who here remembers paying extra to pay, like, to make a call on a landline to like their friend that didn't necessarily live in your same area code? We're going to see that people avoid the library and they just search on the web for their answers. Keep in mind, the web was originally made to like survive a nuclear attack as a communication system, so it comes back to that Cold War. We see all kinds of new websites coming up, from .com versus like .edu, .gov, and .org. By the way, if you're ever citing something from something, generally avoid .com and go with one of the others. I'm not saying automatically if they're .org, they're 100% better, but generally they tend to be a more reputable source. And then, of course, technology means we get more sleek, like handheld devices and such when it comes to phones, and then wireless phone companies. And then eventually we get social media with, MySpace and Facebook. We're also seeing with this instant access and technology, meaning that things like business and financial information can go across the globe much quicker. And so this is going to accelerate the globalization of the American economy. We see things like in the 80s, America actually began to do more business with like Pacific nations than actually with Europe. And then in 1993, you get NAFTA, or NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. This combined Canadians, Mexicans, and American consumers basically into one single common market, very much similar to like that of Western Europe. We're seeing an enlargement of free trade zones, and a lot of this was intended to like open up new markets and make the United States be able to compete more effectively against like European nations and like Japan. This is going to revive the old debate though between like free traders and protectionists. Getting into this just super quick. Free trade, the idea is that it's opening up competition and it's becoming more capitalistic in that way. It's also eliminating tariffs. It becomes that you're opening up to more nations, but the problem with this is under the protectionism viewpoint, that protectionism where you want to actually restrict trade to protect like domestic firms, because then they don't have to compete against like some European nation, so to speak. So it's kind of, where is the balance of these two sides on this argument, basically. I should also mention, when we're looking at like a world market, we're also getting a lot more tourism across the globe during this time period. People worked abroad, as well as even like going as far as to retire in other nations.